This is Ed Solly. Thank you for joining the Vet Voice channel, the media wing of VFAF, and we have a VFAF endorsed candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, Gordana Schifanelli, and she is going to discuss her main topics. She's got the running mate of Dan Cox on the Republican ticket coming up for her election in November. They won a big election here in the primaries not too long ago, so now they are the clear winners for the Republican end and a, let's call it, leans Democrat state, but replacing a Republican governor who seems to be having some kind of difficulties with Dan Cox running, but we'll get to that. So I want to start off first. Welcome to the show, Gordana, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And one of the first things I was doing my research on you and reading about you and seeing the things you've put out, and your main issue is schools. Schools is your top topic. I think I saw that your husband ran for school board, maybe a write-in candidacy in 2020. So tell me what you're seeing, because so schools is something real close to me. I ran for a state office here in Georgia, and schools and school choice specifically was my main topic. And I live in a very conservative county with 5 Republican school board members, and we're still seeing the social indoctrination here in my county. So tell me what you're seeing in Maryland that's got that as your number one choice.
I think everyone is seeing the same thing. It started for us in 2020 when on June the 5th, then superintendent of our school district issued a letter inviting students to join her supporting Black Lives Matter organization. That was the time when our schools were shut during COVID. That was the COVID fear era across the nation, including in Maryland. But yet somehow we saw Antifa, Black Lives Matter rioting in our country starting in May, June of 2020. And it seemed like COVID restrictions did not apply to them, but the schools were continuously closed, and our people were stuck at their homes in fear of COVID deaths. So on one hand, you had this dichotomy of, if you're protesting against the police and then President Trump's policies by Antifa, Black Lives Matter, then COVID won't get you. And if you are a student trying to go back to school, or if you're a parent trying to force the Board of Education in each county across the country to reopen schools, the opposition was, like, death is imminent. Everyone is going to die because of COVID. And at that point, I realized that there is something really, really evil happening to the entire country. And that same reflection came back to me as someone who grew up in communist country. I grew up in socialist communist Yugoslavia. I came to America when I was 28 years old. So I didn't grow up here. I did not go to school here. I am married to a veteran, disabled veteran. He's a Green Beret, 22 years served the United States Army. And at that point, I realized that for whatever's worth, I can see ahead where we're going as a nation. Similar trends that were happening in the fall of Yugoslavia, which was the communist country, due to globalist elitists at that time from European Union. The same exact prescription was now implicated on the people of the United States. So my first notion was to post something on Facebook saying, look, I disagree with the behavior of the school superintendent. She's politicizing the school. We can't do that. Reopen schools, let the kids back to school. We were at that time having a severe situation of depression. Just for your viewers to know, I live on Kent Island. Kent Island is separated from the mainland with the Bay Bridge, one of the scariest bridges in America. We had 3 attempted suicides, and bridge jumpers people were jumping off the bridge to commit suicide. One time in 2020, we had a person on the bridge blocking the traffic continuously for 3 days straight. We were in this. Meanwhile, the rioting and burning of DC is going on. And meanwhile, the superintendent wants children to join her to protest against the police. So the picture is grave for any parents to understand that the children are now being used as social justice warriors to tear down the fabric of our country. I don't know if your viewers know, I taught at the Naval Academy for the past 7 years. My last class ended in January 22. So for me, viewing this under the totality of circumstances meant that I had to speak up. But remember, it was end of June at the time, 2020. Ballots have been published. People were voting via mail, and we were facing the school board, all Republicans at the time, or most of them Republicans. There was one Democrat out of 5 on the school board, and they were all in sort of appearance of complete frozen state of mind. They could not lead. They couldn't tell the superintendent, you cannot violate Maryland statute that prohibits public employees from political activism during business hours. That is in our law. We've got the laws. There's no enforcement of that law. There's no one that had the courage to stand against one superintendent leading the charge and protest against the police officers. As I spoke up, I spoke with my husband and I said, look, we need to do something. We need to step up. And I asked him if he could run for the school board for District 4, I'll find somebody to run for the school board District 3. And maybe we can take down the school board and maybe we will send the message. But the only option for us at that time was to actually have the voters write the names of our candidates on the ballot, since the ballots were printed and people were voting, and it was the presidential election of 2020. So believe it or not, we did organize a grassroots tornado. We stormed the precincts. We won on the write-in, made history with over 12,000 people writing combined Mark and Helen on that ballot. And our people moved onto the school board. As the tornado was getting into this school system, the superintendent decided that she was going to disappear. So she was missing in action for 2 months. No one knew where she disappeared. And I had Baltimore Sun calling me, asking me what I did with her. So it was that crazy.
I'm sure her checks are still clearing, though.
I was like, no idea. Well, she was getting fully paid, absolutely. But apparently she gave an interview later on that I stressed her out. So for the viewer's discretion, I have the tendency to stress people out.
That's okay.
So she disappeared, moved out of state after we got on board, and we cleaned up our school board. We got a new superintendent. The woman is trying her best under the circumstances. And the reason I say under the circumstances is that Governor Hogan, who is Liz Cheney clone, someone who hated Trump day one, someone who was absolutely against America First agenda as far as his behavior in office, tweeting against Trump, promoting socialist policies that were otherwise promoted by all Democrat legislature in the Senate and in the House in our local state. He abandoned, as I can clearly state, Republican conservative principles. And jumped ship. She's a Republican governor, but behaves as the worst Democrat we could. Like Adam Schiff couldn't get him anywhere near. I mean, that left-leaning, globalist-leaning Hogan has been. So, but people are not stupid in any state, and that goes for Maryland. So slowly but surely, every little school district, every little county started brewing inside, and America First policies have been front and center, not just for the Republicans, but also for independent voters. We have about a million independent voters on or about. And yet there are Democrats who are jumping ship and coming and joining the Republican Party. So we see this turnaround in Maryland that has been 2/3 Democrats for the past 100 years. What I see is that people wanted me to continue. So my job wasn't just to help my county. Everybody started calling. I became an instant on-demand person to provide some feedback, what to expect. Right. And most people were asking me a couple things. Gordana, they say, You lived in Yugoslavia. The inflation in Yugoslavia in 1994 was 313 million%. Can you tell us how to survive? Can you tell us what's ahead of us? What are we going to do if, in fact, we end up under a all Democrat control? And the issue became really controversial. Dan Cox, a delegate from Western Maryland, called and asked if I would run with him as his lieutenant governor. I had no desire to work in any kind of government. I am anti-government of any kind, of any sort.
Right.
But just the way chips fell, I said, well, if I'm going to run for an office this time and this time alone, it's going to be for American people. And that means we are going to have grassroots, all hands on deck. And this time we're going to fight against Hogan machinery, which was the Republican rhinos, which are not Republicans. They are Republican imposters. And we're going to have to fight 2/3 Democrats. So we are just a teeny group of patriots. And we started building our momentum. And I must admit that Virginia victory gave us a huge booster of optimism that it is possible. It can be done only if people will kind of join us. And what I'm talking about is common sense. I don't see this country divided into Democrat Republicans based on traditional division between the Republicans and Democrats in the past. Like anything that was 20 years ago is no longer the rule. Right now, I see globalists on one side and patriotic Americans on another. So if there is a party to be formed called American Patriots, this is the party that comprises Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. And we are definitely underfunded. But we do have the heart and love for America that the other side does not. And so that's
all
where we are.
politics is local, and you're starting on the local end and doing grassroots, and that's the way to win a campaign. So I want to go back and talk about the inflation that you talked about in Yugoslavia. I'm sure you're aware, Joe Biden announced, a few minutes ago that he's forgiving $10,000 to $20,000, depending on Pell Grants. If you make less than $125,000 of federal loans, I know that's a federal issue, and you're running for Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, but that affects your constituents. That's an inflation driving force. So how do we, one, stop that on a grassroots level, make people aware of what that actually causes? And two, what do we do moving forward? It plays right into your schools being so important, secondary educations and colleges, and how they're paid for and who pays for them. Tell me your stance on that and where you fall on that line.
So there's multiple questions in this question. The first question is the inflation. The inflation can only be stopped with organic growth of the GDP, gross domestic product. You cannot stop inflation if you don't have growth in manufacturing growth, American growth. I happen to be an economist before I went to law school in University of Baltimore School of Law. So I kind of wear two hats. I kind of understand the economics and finance behind this. You cannot stop inflation by printing money. That is creating inflation. And by forgiving something that's not for you to forgive. And so these are games that now the federal government, the Democrats, have been played on the paper. The reality is we're in big trouble. They shut down, the Democrats shut down our manufacturing, and it all goes back to energy. Once you shut down the energy source, you are importing things for which you have to give fresh dollars to pay to buy. Things don't fall off the sky for free unless it's a meteorite. And so you just don't do things that are counter science, counter economic theory and practice. So we need manufacturing back to stop the inflation. That's not going to happen with the forgiveness of the loan. Anytime government gets involved between a borrower and a lender, it distorts the balance of powers between a borrower and a lender. When the distortion happens, one side is favored versus another. That is a signal of unhealthy economy that needs to be stopped. in 2008, financial collapse should have taught us a lesson when the government was guaranteeing loans to the banks and mortgage lenders, and when lenders were giving out loans without any kind of secure collateral or proof that a person borrowing $1 million to buy a house can actually pay a mortgage on a $1 million loan. So if we do no document verification, no income verification, if we go ahead and continue to guarantee, when the government continues to guarantee something for one actor in the two-way street, it becomes distorted and the economy starts crumbling, and we just go back into the spiral of inflation snowball that will hurt us all in the end. Nothing that is done now in a wrong way will protect us from some bad, dire consequence in the future. We just have to know that. The second portion of the question is the education. The reason these games are played on American people is, number one, because the American people, and I'm going to insult a lot of you guys, 20, 30, 40 years back, have been dumbed down slowly. Yeah. I've lived in America for the last 23 years. 20 years ago, I had my firstborn. When he started school, we had Bush's No Child Left Behind experiment. Right. That was my oldest. The second, my second son, now my oldest is in the Army. He's a second lieutenant. The second son, who is also in the Army, came 2 years later. At that time, we had Obama. And his experiment was Common Core. When they started introducing Common Core into elementary school level, before the kids are taught upside down math and fake science, the teachers have to be trained to impose that new technique, how to teach kids something that old Greeks have taught without a problem thousands of years ago. Now these teachers are twisted and their brains have been distorted how to teach common sense, common math. Instead, we ended up with these triangles and stuff that when I saw what my son was doing, I thought that was crazy. I mean, what the hell? He didn't know times tables. He was trying, instead of memorization of times tables, they're trying to reinvent math. Right. After him, my last son came around. Now he's 8th grader. And there was another experiment where we had, at that time, Betsy DeVos was our Secretary of Education on a federal level, and that kind of trickles down. Every time federal monies are given to the states, then there is a commandeering of the federal government to the states how to do and what to do to the kids. Nothing helped. So after 20 years of watching this disaster, we have a 20-year time gap of people who grew up in this country without having rational head, without having a rational way of thinking. They can't think rationally, and anyone on the news tells them something, they believe that's true. In fact, when the latest one was when someone decided to say that you can be he, she, it, and there is a pronoun, plethora of pronouns, that's called fake English. Now, English is my third language. I reject that. And we cannot accept that it's normal to be called a Z and you think you're a cat and you need a cat litter in school to drink water from. That is bizarre. It is sick. This is not inclusion. This is not equity. It hurts children. It hurts families who are often lost because they can't think for themselves what to do with this distorted reality and humans becoming something that they are not and never will be. Men cannot give birth to babies. That's just the science. We can't turn this around. There's nothing we can do about it. We have 2 genders and not 57, but yet Maryland schools adopted the equity principle, something that realistically is intended to destroy the nation by dumbing down population and telling the people something that simply is not true. Right. Well, and for years we were taught don't buy into delusions, and now we're reinforcing delusions. Yeah. And we're seeing that. I mean, there's a lost generation. There's a whole generation of kids that are going to have no identity, nothing secure to fall back on. And that was the big push for me, why I was such a school choice advocate. We are the. Yeah, there's no way the government is going to be able to educate
my children the way that I want them educated, that we had to pull our kids from public school and put them in a Christian school because we wanted the Christian environment, the Christian education. But that's expensive, and there's sacrifices that come with that. Now, fortunately, my wife and I were able to do it, but there's so many families that we talk to on a regular basis that just couldn't. They were struggling with their kids in public school to pay all the bills. They can't add a 10, 15, $20,000 tuition on top of that. That that's where I think the states need to, and the government needs to step away from the control. We've created a monopoly in almost all of these states where the largest employer is the government school system, and they run the state from the inside out because they have all the money. So
And
what's your plan with school choice?
so the school choice, Maryland, in fact, passed the legislation. We are the school of choice state, but the school of choice pertain to just public schools. And only if you, in other words, if you belong in a particular district, then the public school choice means you can take your child to a different public school. Our school of choice plan means school of choice, period. If you are paying your taxes and your taxes are going towards funding education in your state, in your local county, then you have the right to take that money, and the money has to follow the child, and that money will be directed towards any school you feel is appropriate for your child. I am a big proponent of free market and quality competition. When we have schools that will be opening up with different programs, then the parents will get the power to decide what kind of program and education is best suited for those families. I am not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying that the parent needs to have the ultimate decision and choice about the child's curriculum, what the kids are learning, and who's teaching them. So if you have a woke teachers and teachers union pushing political agenda as opposed to proper math, history, geography, and science, well, then the parents should be able to take that money that is going to failed programs and employ that money to wherever they believe their child will best benefit.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then the last thing I really wanted to talk to you about, obviously police reform has been a Democratic talking point now for 5, 6 years. Maryland's been hit pretty hard, and mainly in Baltimore and your main cities. Same here in Georgia, Atlanta. They've stopped enforcing laws. I mean, the lawlessness has run wild. I got to spend some time talking with Governor Kemp the other day, and he was, imploring that the safety in Atlanta has just gone so far downhill that it's just not safe to visit anymore. And I know Baltimore's feeling the same, feeling the pinch.
Absolutely.
So what's the plan, Lieutenant Governor and Governor? I know it's difficult because each police force is usually run by cities and there's state forces that you can use. And that's what Governor Kemp has done. He's spent millions and millions of dollars putting state troopers in Atlanta police cars so he can still have control and we can still pursue. What's your plan to get this lawlessness to at least subside? I mean, we're heading in one direction right now. We're heading there fast.
Right. So Maryland has been just the same as every other crime-infested territory, and I can tell you, the Governor Hogan, the Republican, mind you, Governor Hogan, actually imposed vaccination requirement to the police officers is in order for them to keep their jobs. My law office received calls and calls from the police officers saying, look, I had COVID, I had a shot, I even had the booster, and I don't feel good. Now they want to fire me if I don't have a third booster.
Right.
All these things cause experienced police officers to retire, go to medical leave. They don't feel good. I mean, that's a fact. And we are running a significant shortage in policing. That's number one. Number two, personal liability has been imposed on the police officers. And Maryland, a two-thirds Democrat legislature attempted to carve out qualified immunity against the police officer. So anybody can sue a police officer for doing his or her job. That alone caused police officers to say it's not worth it. So if I'm chasing after someone who is stealing a TV in Target, and that person trips on the cord, falls down and breaks his ankle or neck because I'm chasing a thief, I can be personally sued, reprimanded, or demoted because the pursuit or chase over a stolen TV set is not worth the quote broken neck or death of a particular criminal.
Right.
So in that criminal apprehension, so qualified immunity situation has been significantly imposed and carved out from our police officers, and they're just like, I'm done, I'm gone. Then the police force has been carved even further from their ability to do the job by imposition of sheriffs to have advisory council. So now you have to have citizens that are not law enforcement representing an advisory council and telling a sheriff what he should or shouldn't do, can and cannot do in order for a sheriff to properly do his job. These are not ways to promote law and order. These are the ways to chase away everybody that you can that has any kind of experience going after the crime, and that alone boosts crime. And of course, we are running 300 police instead of 800 police officers on the streets of Baltimore per day. We're less than 200. Mental health issue of the police officers have never been addressed. They don't have a place where they can congregate to exchange ideas, to call for a backup. I was walking down West Baltimore the other day, and I saw a lone officer in a dilapidated vehicle that I thought that was a movie set. I went to talk to the police officer. He said, no, I'm on duty. I said, how can you be on duty all by yourself? Well, so-and-so canceled, and so-and-so is not, I don't have a backup. Yeah. To me, the first thing was, how on earth are you going to drive this car that looks like it's going to fall apart? The car was beat up. The vehicle he was using was beat up. His plastic holders around his waist were broken. It looked horrible. There were some vehicles that Governor Hogan paid for and bought, but he himself, this police officer that I saw in West Baltimore, was using a very bad vehicle that he could not engage in any kind of official chase in case, or a hot pursuit if in fact happens. We have lawlessness beyond belief, number one. Number two, the law and order in Maryland is further diminished by importation of illegal immigrants from the southern border. Governor Hogan's Health and Human Services website was proudly announcing that the state of Maryland is number 6 in the nation on accepting illegal immigrants into Maryland. I was told that in further on the Eastern Shore, we, for the first time in I don't know how many years, we had in hospitals incidents of leprosy.
Right.
Leprosy. We have Stone Age diseases in the modern Maryland, hospitals. Because why? We are busing them up here and accepting the illegal immigrants. Now, obviously, I am an immigrant. I am all about immigration. I think this country is built on immigrants who are pursuing their dream in a proper, lawful manner. But you can't violate the law and expect benefits and expect Maryland taxpayers or American taxpayers to pay for services that you are not entitled to get in this country. Economic hardship is not part of the asylum application last time I looked at the law. So what I'm saying is that we have so much work to do when it comes to lawlessness, law and order. And when it comes to illegal immigration, Maryland is a sanctuary state. We are having sanctuary cities all over. In other words, the police officers cannot look up, are you here legally or lawfully? Maryland's also one of the states that have been identified by the election board as one of the states where there was significant election fraud. In fact, by counties, one of the 5 counties that have been identified subject to election fraud in 2020. We have so much work to do. We have MS-13 gangs from El Salvador, Central America, right here in Maryland in PG County. We, Prince George's County, we have to fix our Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Prince George's County. We have to fix the school system. We have to fix law and order. We have to fix infrastructure. I mean, if you're not getting dizzy, we have so much work to do in this state that's not even funny. But
well,
but
and I'm afraid of what the future, because this is just what we're seeing now. But like with law enforcement, I mean, the academy enrollment is at record lows. So not only is retirement and forced retirement at record highs, the replacement rate is dwindling. So at some point, we're not really going to have police forces around the country. And then the immigration issue, one of the things that the left likes to talk about is, well, we're a country of immigrants and we're founded by immigrants and everyone came here. Well, what they forget is in the middle of the 1900s, we passed bills that gave safety nets and a way for people to survive. And at that point, our immigration has to change. Once we start paying for you to be able to live here, you have to control who lives here. Now, we're never going to get rid of the social net, the social safety net. That's never going to go away, but we can control who comes and takes advantage of it. And if you're coming here to work and to sustain yourself, then you're more than welcome to come. I'm a big proponent of you coming. If you're coming for me to work and me to sustain you, then I think you should just stay home.
So the past, I'll tell you, we are an immigration law firm. So we have just before I jumped on this call, we had a letter from immigration saying that one of our clients has to provide additional request for additional evidence over special interest waiver green card application, which is permanent resident card application. This person is a scientist with over 55 published scientific works. This is a person of exceptional ability. That person's case has been going on for the last 2 years. This person is a genius. So right. This person, a genius, has to provide proof to our immigration that person is a person of exceptional abilities and deserves to stay here legally. And that person is following the law and doing what needs to be done, and it will all be okay. Meanwhile, you have wide open border in Texas and Arizona, and you have the worst fabric of anyone's society crossing over, and that is destabilizing our country. Veterans, I implore everyone to get involved. You've served our nation. My husband is serving the nation again on the school board. I am so happy to see a record number of veterans, Americans, running for office, fighting from the local school board all the way up to Senate on every single state, because there's only one way to save our nation, which is all hands on deck, get serious, and let's everybody group together and everybody help each other with fundraisings, donations to whoever is running for office, as long as the person is America First candidate. And that's very important. It's very important. So my website where people can make donations is restorefreedoms with an S, restorefreedoms.com, and coxforfreedom.com for Dan Cox for governor.com. Please consider sending your donations, because we must win. We cannot survive in Maryland if we don't win the governorship this fall.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you jumping on, and good luck in your race coming up.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless.